This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. I do ask if you are not talking to please mute yourself to help prevent feedback. I'm going to start with establishing a quorum and do a roll call for the board. Harold Latham.
Here.
Mark Newhouse. Billy Stevens.
Present.
Mark Patterson.
Here.
Chuck Dodd.
Present.
David Gaddis. David, I can see you. I'm going to count you here. Mark Gibson.
Present.
Okay. All right. I guess we'll get going here. Let's see. Public comment. Is there anybody on the line from the public that would like to address the board?
Hello, this is Michael Timpson. I'm just sitting in. I wanted to listen to what y'all are going to do about the Porter Green deal. I know it's way down in the agenda, but I am watching and present.
Good deal. Thank you, Mr. Timpson. Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, I guess we can now move on to item number 3, which is to consider and act upon approval of the minutes of the April 16th, 2020 board meeting. That should have these minutes in your packet. You can also see up here on my screen. We'll need a motion and a second before voting, and I do ask that anybody who makes a motion or second, please state your name so we can make sure to capture that.
Billy Stevens, accept to approve the minutes.
We've got a motion, Billy Stevens. Wait a second.
Second by Mark Gibson.
Any discussion before we vote? Okay, to vote, Harold Latham.
I approve.
Billy Stevens.
Approve.
Mark Patterson.
I approve.
Chuck Dodd.
I approve.
David Gaddis.
Approve.
Mark Gibson.
Approve.
Okay, good deal. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to consider and act upon the 2019 audit. We have April Hatfield with McClanahan Homes out of Bonham. As you all know, they were the firm that was engaged to perform our audit for 2019. They have completed that now, and she is on the phone, and she will, I'll try to bounce through the pages here as she tells me which pages she is discussing. April, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll start. I think it's page 15 of your agenda packet, Drew, and it's page 1 of our report.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. If you'll just say the page of the report, and I can go through there. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. So what we're looking at is our independent auditor's report. It states that we have audited the accompanying financial statements of the governmental activities and the major fund of Red River Groundwater Conservation District as of and for the year ended December 31st, 2019. Management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements, and our responsibility is to express opinions on these financial statements based on our audit. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities and the major fund of Red River Groundwater Conservation District as of December 31st, 2019. And that basically is that you guys received a clean opinion. I will skip to page 7 of our auditor's report. This is a statement of net position. I'll go into the details on another statement. The difference in this one and the one I will be discussing is just that this capitalizes your fixed assets, or if you ever had debt, it would show it here. And the next page will have a government-wide presentation of your statement of activities. So on page 9, I'll go through your balance sheet of your general fund. Cash was $414 at the end of the year. It was up about $53,000 from last year. Accounts receivable $96,000, up about $13,000 from the prior year, and prepaids were similar to last year for a total assets of $512,000, increased about $66,000 from the prior year. The next section are your current liabilities, which consist of accounts payable and drillers deposits for total current liabilities of $13,000. That was down about $17,000 from the prior year, mainly due to at year end last year, the G2A invoice had not been paid yet, so it was just a timing issue. Not issue, but difference. And then total fund balance of $499,139 at the end of the year. The bottom section just reconciles the difference in this statement and the statement on page 7 that I first showed you. Just capital assets. I'll show you the detail on those later. On page 10, this is your statement of revenues and expenditures and changes in fund balance. Total revenues were $370,000. And that was down about $4,000 from prior year, and total expenditures were about $86,000. That was down from prior year, mainly due to there was some capital purchases last year related to the software and some higher legal fees last year. So your net change in fund balance was a positive $84,000, again for an ending fund balance of $499,139. Page 11 begins your accounting policies. I won't go into detail there. I will start on page 13. Your capital assets consist of the software development in progress and then one vehicle. There was no change to that in the current year, so no additions or retirements. And the only change was in just the current year depreciation expense, and that's the $4,807. Page 14, in note E, just states that the district has a minimum fund balance equal to 25% of general fund expenditures. That requirement was met. And then in note 2, there were no expenditures that exceeded appropriations this year. Page 15, I'll just point out the concentration note that the customer that was 41% of the receivables is City of Sherman. Same thing for that revenue number. And then the majority vendor is G2A. Page 16 is your budgetary comparison schedule. Your revenues had a favorable variance from your budgeted amounts of $45,000, and expenditures had a favorable variance of $61,000. So as I stated, there were none over budget. The other piece of our audit is the governance letter. There's not much notable here or changed from last year, just to continue to enhance and maintain the drillers deposits as you have switched softwares and make sure that gets maintained and looked at and rolled forward each year. Outside of that, there wasn't much else notable for the year, not a whole lot of significant changes. And that is all I have unless there are any questions.
Are there any questions from the board on the audit? If there are none, we'd accept a motion in a second at this time.
David Gaddis, I make a motion, we accept the audit.
Chuck
Billy
Dodds, second.
Stevens, second.
Chuck Dodd, sorry, Billy, Chuck beat you to it. Chuck Dodd, second. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing
The
none.
staff, all-
Go ahead,
Drew,
sorry.
is the staff satisfied with the audit?
We are.
That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mark. Harold Latham,
I approve.
Mark Newhouse, Billy Stevens,
Approve.
Mark Patterson,
I approve.
Chuck Dodd,
I approve.
David Gaddis,
I approve.
Mark Gibson.
I approve.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, April, and you're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to hop off at this time. Thank you.
I'll hop off. Thank you, guys.
Okay, moving on to item number 5, review and approval of monthly invoices. As you all know, we did not have a meeting in May, so this is capturing 2 months worth of expenditures. Really not much out of the ordinary here, but we'd be happy to try to answer any questions if there are any. This is also an item that needs to be voted on. So.
Billy Stevens, approve.
Motion, Billy Stevens.
Harold Latham, second.
Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none. Harold Latham,
Approve.
Billy Stevens,
Approve.
Mark Patterson,
Approve.
Chuck Dodd,
Approve.
David Gaddis,
Approve.
Mark Gibson.
Approve.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. We can now move on to item number 6. This is not an action item, just a presentation item. You should see on your screen there the balance sheet. This is as of May 31. You can see total cash, kind of the highlights. Total cash in our First United account is $278,889.51. We also had an AR at that point of $4,132. Moving on to the profit and loss budget versus actual. This is again as of May 31. Keep in mind this only captures 1 quarter's worth of billing as far as production goes, and which so far through the first quarter about 25% of our revenue, which is on target. I always remind you guys that generally the 3rd and 4th quarters are the highest producing months of the year, or periods of the year. And then you'll go down there at the total expense. We're 41% of the way through the year, and as of right now, we're about 36% of the way through the budget. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that the board has on this. Again, it is not an action item.
Drew, I was wondering if you could zoom in on the screen a little bit. It's on my monitor. It's kind of real hard to see. Perfect. Thank you.
Also, just to point out to everybody, at the top third of your screen, there should be an arrow. So if you don't want to look at everybody's video, you can drag that up and you have a fuller screen. In addition, if you drag it down, if you want to see folks' video instead of the screen. Okay, moving on to item 7. This is an appointment of a budget committee. The committee serve at the pleasure of the president. He can appoint a committee. This does not have to be posted on the agenda, but we generally try to do that if we have a meeting preceding the budget cycle. Usually we try to get our budget adopted, but even though we go from January 1 to December 31, we like to have that done before the cities go into their next budget years. Most cities, water supply corps, start their budgets on October 1. And so, or I shouldn't say most, a lot of them do. And so we usually try to have all that set before they start their next budget year. So we try for like July or August. With that, I'll turn it over to Mark and let him lead that discussion.
Anybody want to throw their hand up and volunteer?
David Gaddis will volunteer.
Chuck very quietly raised his hand.
I will volunteer.
Do we need one more?
We don't necessarily need one more, but we're allowed up to one more to avoid a quorum.
Well, I'll do it then.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. And are you all, do you want to meet in person, or would you like to do it using this same format? Or do y'all have a preference?
This is Chuck. Either way works for me.
Either way is fine with me too.
David, are you okay with this format?
Either way, be fine.
Okay, sounds good. I'm sorry that wasn't necessary here, but it saves a few emails. So, okay, moving on to item number 8. This is to receive the quarterly investment report. This is actually, obviously the quarter ends March 30. There was a lot going on economically at that time. The meeting following that, and the interest rates in our accounts were varying, and so or I guess maybe we met a little bit before, but also the interest rates in the accounts. But so this is through April 30. You can see on here on your screen, or as of April 30, we had $216,179.50 in our First United account. And then we had 2 CDs, one that matures February 15th of next year and one that matures next week. With our next, this is not an action item. Our next agenda item is to discuss our investment strategy, possibly increasing the CD investment rates and maybe lowering the amount that we keep in our checking account. Are there any questions on that before we move on to item 9? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 9. This is to consider and act upon updating the district's investment strategy. As you know, the board has given us direction in the past to invest $200,000, and the board asked us to ladder that out. Our investment policy does not allow us to go out any further than a year, and so generally what we try to do is we do our best to keep those at 6 and 12 month increments. And obviously our fund balance continues to grow, and we have what some may consider to be excess funds in our checking that we could be putting to work in a CD, earning a little more interest than we're earning in our checking account. And so what Debbie and I have come up with is, I'll zoom in here. This section right here, we're hoping so basically to strive to maintain a checking account balance of at least $90,000, which is approximately 3 months of expenditures. Place the remainder of district funds into FDIC insured or collateralized CDs, striving to keep the CD balances laddered in no longer than 12-month investments. And keep in mind that with this 3 months expenditure, so the $90,000, we go 3 months in between billing cycles. And so we're talking about having 3 months of expenditures at the valley of that curve. In the worst case, we have $90,000, and it will obviously be larger than that immediately following a billing. And we felt like that was a relatively conservative approach, but would free up a substantial amount of funds for us to put to work in a CD, earning a little more interest. And you see this last sentence here, this is consistent with our investment policy. Any
Current CD rates, I guess, are what, 0.5%, or what are they? What can you get?
I don't remember exactly. Debbie may be able to chime in, but what we have seen, I do know that the appetite for CDs has, or at least a month ago, was decreased drastically from what it was in February, just because the uncertainty in the economy. But we just haven't, we're not getting nearly as many bids as we normally do. But they have gone down significantly. Debbie, do you have an idea, a rough guesstimate on what we've done recently?
The last CDs that we did for G2A, we got a 0.43%. And that was for 6 months, 6 or 8 months. So yeah, they've dropped considerably.
You can see there, I know it's sideways, but last time we were in the 1.6, 1.98 range. But so, yes, David, you're pretty close.
Has staff given any consideration to any other direction that we might be able to invest in?
We have, but for the last several years, 5+ years, there really hasn't been anything as advantageous as CDs that we are aware of. I mean, even at 1.6, that was low. I mean, that's low relative to, 2009 prior interest rates. But, and as far as GTUA goes, we look at all different options on those, and we just flat out haven't seen anything that can compete with CDs up to this point. So we are monitoring it, yes. And that statement could be modified to, not to say CDs in particular. It could just say investments. And that would still be consistent with our investment policy. But I believe that the interest, I think the Fed has recently said that the interest rates that we have now are here to stay for a while. Are there any comments or questions or recommendations on this? And if there aren't, we'd accept the motion.
I make a motion that we accept the update.
Billy Stevens, second.
Any further comments or discussion before we vote? Hearing none. Harold Latham.
Approve.
Mark Newhouse. Billy Stevens.
Approve.
Mark Patterson.
Approve.
Chuck Dodd.
Approve.
David Gaddis.
Approve.
Mark Gibson.
Approve.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 10, update and possible action regarding the process for development of desired future conditions. Quick update there. We had our most recent meeting on May 15th. It was a go-to meeting, and I think it was fairly successful. Did want to tell the board we are moving forward with the inherent differences survey that we had discussed. We've talked about it, I believe, at least the last couple of meetings, but that has been sent out this week. Our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, August 7th. Tentatively, we do have the Cleburne Conference Center reserved. I have heard from at least one of the GMA members that they will not be attending unless the governor has pulled the authorization for us to continue to meet this way. So my guess is that, assuming that the governor keeps extending the emergency declaration, that we will at least have the virtual option available. There's a possibility that some of the members may want to attend, and but I think regardless, unless that order is rescinded, that we will have the virtual option. So obviously it'd be an easy meeting to attend if some of you would like to sit in on that and see what GMA is all about. Moving on, item A under that is consider and act upon authorizing the district's GMA representative to approve participation in groundwater availability model run 11. And we have James Beach, the district's hydrogeologist, here today to provide a presentation. So bear with me just 1 second. I'm going to turn screen controls over to him. We can't hear you, James. Hey, I'm showing you're unmuted. If all else fails, you can call in and talk through your phone. If you don't have that number, wave to me or something. I'll email it to you real quick. Still nothing. Bear with me real quick. I'm going to email that number to him just in case he does not have it handy. If we want, let's move to item 11 real quick while James is working through these issues. Look at the general. We'll come back to item 10 here in a second. This is the manager's report. Let me share my screen. You can see there, this is as of April 30th. We had 5 new domestic well registrations in April for a total of 948 wells in the district. In May, we had 4 domestics and 1 public water for a total of 953. I did want to point out that the Fund Balance Committee has now met twice and has a recommendation that we were hopeful to bring to the next board meeting where we meet in person. But I guess we'll see when that is. We also have the rules and management plan that we discussed in our last in-person meeting that I think we'd kind of decided that there's so much discussion that has to take place with those that it would be better to all be face to face if possible. And Kristen, is there any update on the injection disposal well monitoring program?
No, we have no applications since we last met.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to make James the presenter again.
Can you hear me, Drew? Can you hear me, Drew? I'm trying to get the PowerPoint up. 1 minute, please. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this should be really brief. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Agenda item 10. Y'all have seen this list of 9 factors before. We covered all of those at previous meetings of yours and also at the GMA 8 meetings. The latest was the last 3 there in May. David and Drew attended that virtually. Just as a reminder, Run 11 extends the period of simulation out to 2080 to be consistent with TWDB planning horizon for regional water planning. We used average recharge in the run and included a drought in the last 3 years of the run from 2078 to 2080. And pumping was altered in 4 of the groundwater conservation districts in 2 other counties. We'll run through those real quick. The one that's closest to you is Upper Trinity, and they basically had, you've heard this before, so I'm going to run through it real quick. They had an increase in pumping just based on the growth out there and better records that they're keeping of about 11,000 acre feet. So they moved from 37,000 acre foot, 38,000 almost to 49,000. You can see that at the bottom line of that. And so that has a small impact on y'all. Also to the south, Prairie Lands made some changes. Those were basically just vertical distribution changes. They did not increase their pumping overall. McLennan County had minor changes in the first decade of the run based on their historic records. Bell County made a few changes, and they made some changes for Williamson and Travis County as well. All this is so far away from y'all, it matters very little. And then they had some minor changes in Burnett County. So we'll run through the changes real quick. This is just a listing of the differences between Run 10 and Run 11. Run 10, remember, was what was accepted last time for the DFCs. And so in Run 11, in the year 2070, to have an equal comparison, these are the changes that we see on a county and aquifer basis. So obviously your counties are not on this slide, but we'll review those here. The slightly red, boxes essentially indicate that you've got a little bit more drawdown, and then the blue boxes indicate that you've got a little less drawdown depending on, the changes that were made. If you look at Fannin and Grayson County, almost all of that is going to be antlers to a large degree, and some Twin Mountain. So you're seeing at 2070, you're seeing 4 to 5 foot of water level decline more than you saw in the last round of planning, and about in the antlers, and then about 9 or 10 foot in Twin Mountain. And just recall that these Woodbine, the Woodbine doesn't show any change here. In the Biloxi, Glen Rose, those are upper units of the model, but really aren't as applicable in your counties. It's sort of a modeling nomenclature. So you're looking at 4 to 10 foot of increased water level decline in your aquifers out in 2070. Fairly minor difference, and those are caused by changes in and around those other districts. And so if we go to look at the total drawdown you're going to be expecting in, starting with the antlers, and this is out in 2080 now, at the end of this run, you're looking at about 269 feet in Fannin County, 364 foot in Grayson County, and Twin Mountain, a little bit you have there would be 400 and 445 total. So that's what you had last time, plus those differences of 4 to 10 feet. And so the path forward, as Drew indicated, there's a meeting on August 7th. We're going to be discussing the Run 11 results, as well as maybe some possible minor changes that other districts might come up with, an appropriate statement that helps the Water Development Board do the simulations and understand what minor differences there might be. And so there's a statement that goes along with the proposed DFCs to go along with that. And then we'll also be talking about other aquifers, non-relevant aquifers that aren't maybe present in Grayson and Fannin counties, but are relevant to or non-relevant in other parts of GMA 8. So as Drew indicated, we're just asking today that David and Drew be able to have those minor or have discussions about those changes and the proposed DFC statements at the August 7th meeting. And that is all. If anybody has questions, I'll take them.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what we're doing is, if David gets to the point where there's a change that he considers to be minor, that he has the latitude to vote on behalf of Red River. And if there's something that he's uncomfortable with, a change that's substantial enough that he's uncomfortable with it, that at that time we might be able to form a DFC committee to help guide his decision. And it's obviously not my decision who the DFC committee is, but Harold Latham would be a good add if that did need to occur. Harold has attended, I believe, every single GMA meeting since I've been here. So he's very in tune with what's going on also. But David, does that work for you? Are you okay with that approach?
That's fine.
And then on the final slide here, just as a reminder, the proposed DFCs actually need to be in by January 15th of next year. So, we're approaching the next meeting in August, trying to get those officially, the Run 11 officially proposed and the DFCs from that proposed. Then we'll come back to the districts to have an official discussion about the 9 factors and how those, might be impacted by these DFCs, and then hopefully go back to GMA 8 in the fall and approve the DFCs, and then they'll be submitted prior to January of 2021. So that starts the whole process that's laid out here, which we won't go into, but some of y'all are familiar with that from the last time, but that's all. Thank you.
If there is not further discussion, the motion that the staff would recommend would be something along the lines of giving David Gaddis authorization, or giving your GMA rep the authorization to vote on Run 11 with, as long as the changes are not substantial, and that if substantial changes at David's discretion do occur, that a DFC committee could then be formed at Mark Patterson's pleasure and help advise him on which way to vote.
I so move.
Mark Patterson with the motion.
Second by Mark Gibson.
Second by Mark Gibson. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none. Harold Latham.
Approve.
Billy Stevens.
Approve.
Mark Patterson.
Approve.
Chuck Dodd.
Approve.
David Gaddis.
Approve.
Mark Gibson.
Approve.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. That moves us in to item 12. And so item 12 is our enforcement. And as it's posted at the bottom of our agenda, what the plan is to go into executive session to discuss this. And so at this time, what I'm going to do is lock the meeting and ask anybody who is not a staff member who I've already talked to about being in there, or a board member to exit the meeting. And so if you'll exit, and then as soon as you exit, you can log back in to the same link or same phone number. And what it'll bring you to is it'll basically a waiting room of sorts. And so it will basically say you're waiting on the meeting organizer. And so you'll just be kind of stuck there in purgatory for a period of time. And then after the board has discussed all of this in executive session, there will be no action taken in an executive session. So we'll unlock the meeting and open it back up to the public. And that is where, if there is any action, that's where the action will be taken. So at this time, we would ask that everybody begin logging off. And if you want to participate or be present for that last time, to log back in. And let's see. Bear with me just a second. I'm dismissing folks that aren't there. Who is the member that's on as district? Go ahead and dismiss that. Okay, I believe we're down to the board, and give me just 1 second.
I sat through one of these yesterday for a board that's it's a flood management board in the Metroplex, and our meetings go.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. At 11:12 a.m., we are reconvening into regular session. There was no action taken during executive session. With that, we can move on to the action for items, item 12A, B, and C. And Kristen, do you have a motion that you could provide for C. Miller Drilling, item 12A?
You bet. So the recommendation here is that the board adopt a motion that would assess 4 minor violation fines, which would be a total of 400 based on the 4 wells that staff has discovered have been drilled without authorization. And the basis of the 100, so $100 a piece, the basis there is the time that these were drilled.
So moved.
Billy Stevens, make a motion to accept that.
Okay, so we have Mark with the motion, Billy Stevens with the second. Any further discussion before a vote? Hearing none. Harold Latham.
Approve.
Billy Stevens.
Approve.
Mark Patterson.
Approve.
Chuck Dodd.
Approve.
David Gaddis.
Approve.
Mark Gibson.
Approve.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 12A, Porter Green. Kristen, would you provide a motion?
You bet. Based on the board's prior decisions, the recommended motion today is to assess a $500 major violation for continued non-compliance with the board's previous order. And in addition, that's part 1. Part 2 of the motion is that a final notice letter be sent from the attorney, me, that makes clear that there are the violator has 30 days to cease pumping or fix the issue if pumping is going to continue. And the third prong of this motion is that after the 30 days, if the fine has not been paid and the violator has not come into full compliance, meaning either fixing the issue or cease pumping altogether, that my firm is authorized to file a lawsuit that would seek an injunction and penalties related to the continued noncompliance with Chapter 36 in the district's rules.
Board member willing to make that motion?
David Gaddis makes that motion.
Stevens, second.
David Gaddis motion, Billy Stevens second. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none. Harold Latham,
Approve.
Billy Stevens,
Approve.
Mark Patterson,
Approve.
Chuck Dodd,
I approve.
David Gaddis,
Approve.
Mark Gibson.
Approve.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 12C, Bassett Drilling. Kristen, would you provide that?
You bet.
Drew,
The
this-
recommendation, oh, go ahead.
Drew, this is Michael Timpson. I just had a couple of comments on the Porter Green, if that's okay.
Kristen, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine to go ahead and do it here, and we'll pick up number 3 here in just a second. Go ahead.
We cannot. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I heard what your motions were and so on. You know, back in, I think it was September, October, after you did the study showing that pretty much every bit of water going in was leaking out, you gave him the notice to cease pumping, which he violated that order. In fact, I remember in the minutes that in one of the meetings after that where he had communicated with Drew that he was pumping the wells only as needed, and Drew communicated to him that he was not to pump the wells at all or he would be in violation unless the ponds were fixed and no longer leaking. Now, I live right next door, so I monitor what's going on there. When he did turn the wells off, the pond obviously dropped quite a bit, 5 or 6 feet, and was probably on its way to being empty. But he turned the wells back on and has been running them from what I can see pretty regularly now. And that well that he's running is putting out about 40,000 gallons a day. And so, like I said, it started drying up at my place where all the wastewater was leaking over. And now that he's running the wells again, it's, you know, the ground's becoming saturated. It's flooded again. We're back to the same thing we were at when I brought this to the attention of the conservation team, you know, a year ago. So, you know, to give him another 30 days to stop pumping, you've already done that once. He's clearly has no regard for the authority that you have given him the orders. He has no regard for the waste that he's causing. You know, what he's doing. He has a home over there he's using as a weekend vacation, and the pond is one of the highlights of the home. Well, if he doesn't have that nice pond there, you know, he doesn't have that nice place for these people to rent. So in my mind, he just doesn't care because he's making probably $15,000 a month off of his revenue renting that place with that pond. So again, you ordered him to stop, he didn't. Drew told him to stop using it, he didn't. He's got the wells back on. You know, I talked to Drew recently and he said they were having a hard time getting meter readings, which I can't understand why, because the place is always open and they have the tiny home community right next door where there's usually 10 or 15 employees that could allow you to get the meter readings. So my point is to give this gentleman, Porter Green, whoever, any more leeway is just, you know, to me would be out of the question. He's been warned. He disregarded the warnings. He disregarded the orders, continuing to pump the water. And I know, you know, the board's concern is waste. Well, the waste is entering my property and flooding my property and destroying my property and killing my trees. And it continues to go on. And again, he seems to have plenty of money, so he doesn't really care about the fines or the penalties or anything else. Ultimately, you know, I'm going to suggest that you take the wells away from him, and so he doesn't have the opportunity to continue to waste the water which is coming onto my property and flooding my land and destroying the property. So I guess that's all I want to say about it. But he has completely disregarded your orders, has no respect for your authority, and he has plenty of money, so he just doesn't really care what's going on there.
And Mr. Timpson, yeah, thank you for your comments. And I can assure you, we certainly took all of those factors into account. And one thing I'll mention is that that motion does include that there would be an injunction to us to prevent him from drilling. So like you mentioned, take the wells away. That motion does include that. And the timing is just a legal recommendation based on what we're required to give as final notice. So I completely understand. And like you said, there's a waste issue here and a liability issue on your end. So definitely everything was taken into account. But the motion does include all the things that you had that you mentioned, and I appreciate that.
Okay, I just wanting something to be done because it's gone on way too long. He wastes more water in one day over there than my family uses in 14 months. So one day equals 14 months of water use for my family, which is, just to kind of give you an idea of how much water he is actually wasting. So anyway, if those motions are in there to, cease and desist the pumping, take the well away, I guess I'm happy with that. It's just, again, that he has absolutely no regard for the authority and just, blatantly continues to pump the water and flood our property and doesn't seem to care. So I'm just looking for an end to this. I have no problem with people, enjoying their ponds and doing this, but when it's, number one, wasting the water, draining the aquifer, flooding my property, killing my trees, it's just got to be stopped. And just because he has, more money than he does morals or character doesn't mean that he should be able to continue to get away with it. And that's all I'll have to say. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your comments.
Okay, item 12C, Bassett Drilling.
Right. The recommendation here is that to assess a major violation, which would be a penalty of $500 on the violator, and that is for not drilling within the 30 feet that's authorized in the notice to proceed.
I'll make a motion. Chuck.
Mark Gibson, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before action? Hearing none. Harold,
I approve.
Billy Stevens. Billy, did we lose you?
Approve.
Mark Patterson.
Approve.
Chuck Dodd.
Approve.
David Gaddis.
Approve.
Mark Gibson.
Approve.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. That takes us into the item 13, open forum discussion of new business for future meeting agendas.
I've got something I want to talk about that. And if this is off base, y'all just tell me and I'll sit on my hands and be quiet. But in the light of what's going on in our country right now, we have never opened our meeting with a pledge of allegiance and a prayer, and I think that would be a highly sought after improvement considering what's going on in our world. And I'd like y'all's opinions and maybe the legal opinion of that before we decide what to do.
You can do that. If y'all choose to open from here on out with those two items, you absolutely can do that.
I make the motion, David Gaddis.
Harold Latham, second.
I don't think it's a motion. I think it's just a bunch of guys getting together and saying, hey, this is the way we're going to do this because we're the guys.
Yeah.
Either whatever works for y'all is that's fine here.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So nobody has an opposition. Everybody generally agrees with it.
Yes.
I do.
Agree.
Billy Stevens agrees.
Does that mean the staff is gonna sing something, Pledge Allegiance?
You might be rescinding that motion if that's the case.
We take turns.
Chris,
You don't want me
Hey,
to sing. I'll have to.
I don't have an idyllic memory. Do we have a flag in the meeting room?
yes, we do.
Okay.
And if it comes to that, I'll yeah, yes, we do. And so I guess we also have this that we've used also. So that works if we choose to keep going virtually. So in regards to meeting in person versus this virtual meeting, I was going to talk to Mark, after the meeting and possibly consider sending out a poll to the board. Just that way everybody can answer truthfully and not feel any pressure to answer one way or the other, but basically just to kind of take the board's temperature on their desire to keep meeting this way versus getting back to person versus possibly a hybrid situation. I mean, it's worked pretty well, but anyway, we just want to, we'll take the board's temperature on it. And Mark, if you're okay with that, we'll put.
Is taking the temperature on it a pun?
It wasn't intended to be, but I guess it could have been.
That is good.
I would like to get back to regular meetings, but I also want to keep a pulse on what's going on with the, if we get a sudden spike and things are getting worse again, I think we need to roll back to this. I mean, look at it this way. It's going to be July. We could always meet in the yard of the GTUA because I guarantee you no COVID virus is going to live through a July summer day. So,
meeting
but,
or probably.
But it's up to y'all. I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll send out a poll here soon, and we'll provide those results to Mark, and then the decision can be made on how to proceed forward. Other than that, that's all we have. So if there's no other discussion, we can adjourn.
Hey, Drew, this is
So
Billy
we're going to do
Stevens. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Billy.
I was just gonna tell Drew that I was sorry about the loss of his grandmother, I believe, a while back. And I didn't get to get with you any sooner than this, but I'm sorry about your loss.
I really appreciate that, Billy.
What I was going to say is I'm assuming that we're going to do the same plan that we've been doing. We'll plan a July meeting, and then if it's not necessary, we'll pass on it and reconvene in August.
As long as that process still works for everybody, that's what we'll plan to do. And we usually know 10 or maybe a little bit even more than that days in advance whether we're going to need one or not. We need a motion to adjourn.
Billy Stevens make a motion to adjourn.
Got a second?
What is the date in July?
Bear with me just 1 second, I can tell you.
The 21st. No, 23rd. Oh, no, 16th. Right. 16th.
Yes, the
16 is our normal.
Does the 16th work for everybody if we do end up having a July meeting? Does it not work for anybody? Okay. We'll be in touch with Mark as we get closer to that date, and we'll obviously follow up with the rest of the board. And Ken, keep your eyes peeled for a poll here coming out before too long. All right, well, we have a motion on the table to adjourn. We have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye or hang up.
All right.
All right.
Thank y'all. Have a good one. Be careful. See y'all.
Y'all too.
All right.
All right.